Hello, I'm Janice Karen, Director of Policy, Technology, and Innovation at the Massachusetts Health Data Consortium, or MHTC. I run our Data Governance Collaborative, also known as the DGC. We start each of our weekly meetings with a series of industry quick updates to learn about new and proposed regulations, laws, standards, industry initiatives, and other activity. Join us for this week's updates. If you'll go to the first slide, please. We had an unexpected release. It actually came out Monday, but I saw it yesterday. US CDI version 4 errata release. There are only a few small changes. The main change here are those first two bullet points where this fire code system, which is sort of an expanded value set, was added as something that's acceptable to as required, which means that it's acceptable to support in lieu of the other required sets for this. So people, for these two laboratory data elements, they added these specific fire code systems that are defined on the HL7 fire websites as allowed systems to use for defining that data. They also added a small clarification to the definition of the results unit of measure to say that it was only to be used for quantitative lab results. And then there were some technical corrections to the change log, which were not enumerated anywhere, and I'm assuming are not really relevant to most people. So you can find the updated versions here. They have replaced the old versions. And you can find both the HTML interactive at that website and also download the PDF. Be aware that at least as of yesterday, the PDF that was up had some formatting issues. It was not sufficient to prevent it from being usable, but it definitely had a few issues in terms of how different things lined up in the tables. So, any questions, thoughts, comments here? All right, as per usual, there's no actual version number change except for the use of the word errata and the change of the date of release. So just bear that in mind. All right, let's move on to the next slide. You may remember that we've talked about how ICD-11 seems to be increasingly on the mind of NCVHS several times. To that, they have announced both a set of public meetings and another RFI. This is their second RFI. The RFI has a deadline of January 12th, and then there are 2-day public meetings on November 29th and 30th. They announced them together, and it appeared initially that the meeting was specifically for ICD-11, but I actually don't think that's the case. I think that that's a general meeting that will have some ICD-11 content, and they used the announcement of the RFI to also announce the meeting. But I'm not 100% sure of that because there's no agenda yet. So the RFI itself has basically 5 multi-part questions. And as you can see on the slide, I'm not going to read all of them. They're fairly wide-reaching and expansive, and they give a lot of opportunity to comment on different ICD-11 pieces. We will almost certainly take a look at this at some point, although actually our schedule may make that a little bit more difficult. So actually I should backtrack. We hope to take a look at this in more detail at some point. I think that MHTC is likely to respond to some extent or another regardless. So there'll be more on this later, and you can find the RFI in the Federal Register at that link. Any questions or comments or thoughts there?
Yeah, do you have any insight, Janice, as to how different ICD-11 is from 10?
Yeah, I know we had taken a look at it several times in the past. It's been a while, so my memory is I'm not crystal clear, but I know there was an organizational, like there was the way that data was organized changed. So I would say that I don't think it's like ICD-9 to ICD-10, level of difference, but I don't think it's like a little minor bump either. And I can certainly take a refresh my memory and get a better answer for you. Was someone else trying to talk?
I think that was background.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Does anyone else have any comments or have a better answer for John? All right. Well, John, I'll make a note to follow up on that. And let's move on. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So HHS has put out two related guidance documents. So the first one is a document, interesting because it's a document on how providers can help educate their patients on the privacy and security risks when using telehealth. HHS was actually asked to produce this document by the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, and there's no requirement that this education happens, but there's a recommendation that this information gets shared before every single telehealth visit, explaining what technology is being used, who the vendors are that are providing that technology, if there are any, why this is important, risks, and also that patients can file complaints. So it's kind of interesting. They have a couple of paragraphs under each of these topics, and there might have been one or two others as well. I'm trying to remember. But the gist of it is that there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're recommending be reviewed, and I'm not sure exactly. There's no requirement, there's no specification of mechanism. It seems to me that if you have a short appointment, this could take up your entire appointment. So that also could be a possible downside of this. But maybe if there's a pre-appointment phase, some of this could take place there if people want it. Any thoughts or comments about this?
Oh, like a lead balloon.
Is someone trying to speak?
Yeah,
Is
this is
background?
Patty. I'm just thinking about the providers having to take time out of the day, or the practices trying to organize how to do this. I mean, if it can just be, just be another educational document that they provide to the patients, that's fine. But I think taking up entire, as you say, if it's going to take up time because they have to personally educate them, I think there's going to be dissatisfaction in the practice. That's all.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think the idea, it's not required, so I would expect that it's not going to happen for that reason. But maybe the right answer is a document that gets handed out or something like that. The thing is that it has to be personalized. There's still some overhead because it's not like there can be a single document that HHS produces that gets sent out, because it has to be specific to what's being used on their visit. So there may even need to be a multitude of documents that exist for type A telehealth, type B telehealth, type C telehealth within a specific organization if they support multiple options. So there's still going to be some overhead, but yeah, having that document provided, and like, what do you do if it's a phone call, if it's a phone visit, and you have a policy that this gets done every visit, you're kind of out of luck. But yeah, any other thoughts or comments here? All right, let's go on to the next slide, which is kind of the other side of this, which is a more standard patient guidance. So the direct patient guidance is more standard stuff that the patient can do generally. It's all things that we've all talked about, make sure you're private during your visit. The one that I thought was really interesting was turn off nearby electronic devices that might inadvertently overhear or record you. So for instance, if you could be at home and you could have like an Alexa running or something, and they're recommending that gets turned off. which is a really interesting and not a bad recommendation, but it's not one I've necessarily seen people make before. Everything else was really pretty standard. That last one as well, the USB ports at public charging stations, in addition to public Wi-Fi, is also one that probably doesn't get talked about all the time. I have seen it mentioned before in some of these types of documents. But so they had a pretty robust set of recommendations for patients. And but most of it is pretty standard stuff. Any comments or thoughts there? All right, well, if you'll go to the next slide and pause for a moment. I hope you learned a lot from our quick updates. If you're interested in finding out more about the DGC and its other activities, email me at dgc@mahealthdata.org. That email address is also on your screen.